For as long as there have been armies, there has been a rule everyone swears by. You win wars with bullets and bravery. Not with bulldozers. Not with graders. Not with boxes of bridge parts that look like a child's construction set. In every staff meeting, in every logistics argument, the same belief appears: steel for rifles first. Armor plate for tanks. Shells for artillery. If there is space left in the convo, maybe then you ship the engineer stuff. The Germans believe this. The Americans believe this. Even many of the Brazilians believe this. Engineers are support. Their machines are heavy, slow, awkward. On a cargo manifest they look like dead weight. In the bar, infantry officers joke that the road builders are paisanos, civilians in uniform, useful in peacetime, but in a war of mountains and snow? Surely it's the men with bayonets who will decide everything. On paper, it makes sense. You don't storm machine gun nests with a bulldozer. You don't dig a foxhole with a Bailey bridge. But there is one detail the rule forgets. A division that cannot move, cannot fight. And a division that cannot be supplied, dies where it stands. In 1945, in the icy mountains of Italy, a young Brazilian engineer officer and a battalion of so-called road menders will take that rule, drag it out onto a frozen road, and break it. The Germans will never see it coming. And you're about to walk every mile of that road with him. Picture this. You're 19 years old, a cadet at the military school of Realengo in 1940, when the whole world is already on fire. You sit in a darkened auditorium with hundreds of other cadets as the projector rattles to life. On the screen, German panzers crush Poland in weeks. The film is supposed to impress you. Somewhere in the government, men who admire Berlin think that young Brazilian officers should see what real power looks like. When the lights come up, they expect applause. Instead, the hall explodes in boos. You are one of those voices. You don't want a world run by swastikas. Neither do your friends. At the top, Brazil tries to stay neutral. President Vargas gives a speech from a cruiser on Navy Day, hinting that democracy might be outdated, that maybe the future looks more like Germany or Italy. The speech causes outrage even inside his own government. A few months later, he is forced to walk it back, to say he is not pro-Nazi, that he stands for humanity. Down below, in the barracks and classrooms, the picture is simpler. You're learning gunnery and tactics by day, and listening to the BBC by night. You know the war is coming closer. And you know that neutrality is a rope that eventually snaps. By 1942, the Atlantic is a killing field. German submarines stalk Brazilian waters. Merchant ships burn. The northeast of Brazil suddenly becomes a strategic prize, a launch pad for Allied aircraft crossing to Africa, and a tempting target for any enemy who wants to control that route. So the government makes a decision. It sends troops to the salients of the northeast. It sends air bases, guns, and radar. And it sends you, now a freshly minted second lieutenant of engineers, to a place that has a reputation like a curse. Fernando de Noronha. An ocean island with 3,500 soldiers, a U.S. air base, and nothing else. No fresh water, except rain you catch in cisterns. No crops, except fish you pull from the sea. And a nickname, the destination for bad conduct. Your detachment of transmissions, the unit that handles radios, semaphores, and wiring, counts 110 enlisted men. 100 of them are officially classified as má conduta, men who tried to get expelled from the army so they wouldn't be sent to a foreign war. Men who picked fights, disobeyed orders, attacked their NCOs, and instead of getting expelled, got sent to a rocky island in the Atlantic. You're 20. They look at you like you're the schoolteacher who walked into the wrong neighborhood. So you adapt. You set up strict routines. You drill them on radios and signal flags. And every Saturday, for the loudest troublemakers, there is boxing. No point system. No judges. The fight stops when one man goes down. Week by week, the bad conduct fades. You begin to trust them. And they begin to trust you. Above your heads, every evening, Around 50 American aircraft drop out of the sky to refuel and rest. Every morning, they roar away again, heading for Africa, their engines shaking the island. You practice blackouts. You practice alerts. You practice what will happen if the Germans ever try to land here. You also learn another lesson, far from the headlines. When submarine attacks make the sea too dangerous for large ships, the army turns to rivers and railroads. You transfer back to the mainland. On the São Francisco River, you and 3 other lieutenants stand on a dusty bank in Parapara, choosing how to continue north. 2 riverboats wait. One small, light, unimpressive. One big, tall, seemingly solid and safe. You choose the big one, of course. Bigger must mean better. 8 days later, the small boat is already in Petrolina. Your ship is still stuck on the river, its hull torn open on a rock in the rapids where today the Sobradinho Dam stands. The water was too low. The ship was too heavy. No one warned you that your choice only looked safer. You store that lesson away. In war, what looks strongest on paper can be the first thing to break. By 1943 and 1944, it's clear, Brazil will send troops overseas. A Brazilian Expeditionary Force is forming. 3 divisions were imagined at first, 1 from the south, 1 from the center, 1 from the northeast. In the chaos of medical exams, transfers, dodges, and bureaucratic maneuvers, people scramble to be inside some areas and outside others. You have other problems. Appendicitis. Surgery. Stitches still in your belly when you stand in front of a joint Brazilian-American medical board deciding who is fit for combat in Europe. Technically, you should be out. Practically, you refuse to miss the war. The doctors glance at the fresh scar and shrug you through as fit. The next day, the wound becomes infected. Your younger brother, a newly graduated doctor, drains it and looks you in the eye. Change this dressing every day, he tells you. And don't tell anyone. You obey. Quietly. Under your uniform, the wound heals on a crowded troopship crossing the Atlantic. On September 22, 1944, you stand on the deck of the American transport General Meigs with about 5,500 men of the 2nd Brazilian Embarkation Echelon. Compartments are sealed against torpedoes. Air conditioning shuts off during blackouts. 2 meals a day for most, 3, if you're on a security detail. At night, the lights go out. Hatches lock. The air grows thick with sweat, fear, and the smell of too many men in too little space. Outside, destroyers of the escort drop depth charges and drills that may or may not be real. You wonder, will you ever see land again? Will you ever see Brazil again? You do. But when you finally reach Italy, you discover that your war will not be in a trench. It will be in something the staff officers almost left behind as useless. A road. October 6, 1944. Dawn in Naples. You filed down the gangway into flat-bottomed LCI landing craft, narrow ships that look like half-submerged submarines with doors. Each holds about 200 men. Your destination, Livorno, 36 hours away up the Tyrrhenian Sea. By midday, the small flotilla pulls away from the harbor. 50-plus LCIs plod north in column. The autumn sky darkens. And then the sea turns on you. Waves slam the hulls. The LCIs pitch and roll like toys. Spray lashes your face when you try to breathe fresh air. By night, the officers shove everyone below decks for safety. The hatches close. Inside, the smell of fuel, vomit, and fear is so thick you feel it on your tongue. Every time the ship climbs a wave and drops, your stomach follows it. At one point, something appears off the starboard bow, a twisting column of water rising more than 30 meters into the air. A waterspout. For a few seconds, it looks like the sea has grown a spine and is reaching for you. The LCI veers away. The spout collapses. The next morning, the sea is as calm as if nothing had happened. It always amazes you how quickly the world pretends chaos never happened. In Livorno you march inland to the Tenuta di San Rossor, a prepared camp. The 1st Engineer elements of the 9th Battalion, the unit you now officially belong to, are already at the front, in the Serchio River Valley. They were the first Brazilians under direct command of the U.S. IV Corps, patching the destruction that retreating German engineers have left behind. You belong to the Command and Services Company of the 9th Engineer Battalion. Rank, Lieutenant. Specialty, Intelligence and Information, the adjutant to the S2. Your battalion has fewer than 900 men. Your division's front will soon stretch across 15 kilometers of mountains and valleys. Someone in an office has written that on a neat little map. No manual ever explains how 900 engineers are supposed to be everywhere at once. Your first taste of combat comes near Siviana and Pareda term. Here's the situation. Your company moves as part of a convoy, winding along narrow Italian mountain roads toward a new sector. Orders for blackout discipline are strict. No headlights. No cigarettes visible. The Luftwaffe is almost gone, but almost is not the same as never. Most drivers obey. One does not. A single truck falls behind with mechanical trouble, then hurries to catch up. The driver, impatient and very Brazilian, flips on his lights. Just for a moment, to go faster through a sector where orders say total darkness. That is when you hear it, a faint buzzing, different from the throaty growl of Allied engines. A lone German reconnaissance aircraft. In the time it takes your brain to match the sound, the pilot has already seen the impossible sight, a bright rectangle of Brazilian headlights on a supposedly dark, secure road. He circles once. Twice. Then dives. You throw yourself to the ground as machine gun fire rips the night. Tracers whip through the camp. The pilot makes 2-3 passes, then drops small incendiary bombs. By the time your anti-aircraft guns are ready, he's gone. Your baptism of fire lasts minutes. Its effect lasts much longer. For at least 3 days, no one argues about wearing steel helmets anymore. The winter closes in. By November, your unit is in the Apennines. Temperatures hover around 0. Wind knifes through every gap in your clothing. Snow begins to fall, a beautiful death sentence for anyone who relies on roads. The infantry can huddle in foxholes. The artillery can lurk in gun pits. You and your engineers have no such luxury. You move where the roads move. And when the roads stop, you move while everyone else waits. 80% of your work is not glorious. Conserving roads. Repairing roads. Building roads. Throwing bridges across craters and streams that yesterday weren't there. The other 20% is minefields and frontline tasks. Walking in front of infantry with detectors, lifting the teeth out of the earth while being shot at. But in terms of hours, the war of the engineer is fought with shovels, graders, bulldozers, and a British invention called the Bailey Bridge, steel pieces and crates that many officers initially dismissed as too heavy to bother shipping. Now, in the Italian winter, that useless gear becomes the only reason your division can move at all. Think of one night. It's after a long day spent repairing a mountain road scarred by artillery near Monte Castello. The trucks finally roll again by late afternoon, supplies and ammunition crawling up switchbacks that cling to the slopes like thread. You get back to a rear area just long enough to pull off your boots, thaw your fingers, and maybe close your eyes. Then the first flakes fall. At first, it's almost peaceful. Then the snow thickens. Within an hour, it's a curtain. Phones ring. Runners arrive. The order is simple and unforgiving: keep the main divisional road open. No matter what. If that road dies under snow, everything behind your thin mountain line is cut off. No ammunition for artillery. No food for thousands of men. No way to evacuate the wounded. You look at the clock. It's 2200 hours. Dawn is around 6 o'clock. You have roughly 8 hours before trucks will need to move again. The road you must clear winds for nearly 15 kilometers through exposed slopes, and choke points the Germans know by heart. You grab your section chiefs. 2 graders. 1 bulldozer. Dozens of men with shovels and picks. Fuel that will gel if it gets too cold. Engines that complain when asked to start in ice. You roll out. The snow slaps your face. Your breath fogs in your scarf. The diesel engines cough, spit, and then catch with a roar that seems far too loud in the darkness. You move in a loose formation. The bulldozer up front, blade chewing into drifts. Graders behind, shaving the surface into something trucks can use. Men on the sides scraping, pushing, sweating into clothes that never truly dry. 1 kilometer cleared. 2. 5. Each time the wind picks up, the road begins to vanish behind you, trying to erase the work as fast as you can make it. At one exposed bend, a flash splits the night. An artillery shell lands close enough to bury the bulldozer in a wave of snow and dirt. For a second, everything is white noise and ringing ears. You expect the driver to bail out, to abandon the machine. He does not. The engine stutters, then roars again as he slams the blade down and pushes forward. The grader behind him follows, its operator cursing into the cold. You shout orders. Your voice is swallowed by the wind. 8 kilometers cleared. 9. 12. You feel your toes going numb. Your fingers don't quite belong to you anymore. Around 4:30, the snow eases. The men look like ghosts, faces gray, eyebrows iced, uniforms stiff. At 6 o'clock, the first trucks appear. Their engines rumble behind you like an approaching tide. They climb past the spot where hours earlier the road was a solid wall of snow. They roll toward the front with ammunition, food, medical supplies. Some of the drivers stick a hand out in a quick wave. Most are too tired to notice who kept the road open for them. But you know the math. A division of around 15,000 men stays connected to its lifeline because fewer than 100 engineers and 3 useless machines refuse to let the road die. If those bulldozers and graders had never been shipped, if someone had saved space, 4 more rifles instead. You don't have a division anymore. You have an isolated cluster of units, waiting for German counterattacks with empty magazines and no way to evacuate their wounded through drifts taller than a man. That is what support means on a mountain road. You pause here, for a moment, in your mind. Because if you're the kind of person who can feel the weight of that night, there's a good chance you care about stories like this, the ones buried under snow and paperwork. If you find these kinds of forgotten military stories as fascinating as we do, we'd be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. These tales of courage, sacrifice, and quiet genius rarely make it into the history books, and by subscribing, you help make sure they don't fade into silence. The winter eventually breaks. Snow turns to rain. Mud replaces ice as your main enemy. And then comes the phase the Brazilians will simply call the pursuit. The German defensive line in the Apennines cracks. The Allies push north. Suddenly, the map isn't static trench lines and named hills anymore. It's arrows. The faster you move, the faster the enemy collapses. The slower you move, the more time he has to set up new killing grounds. For engineers, this is both a nightmare and a dream. Every bridge is blown. Every culvert is cratered. Every road is mined or blocked by landslides that may be natural, or may be the work of very smart German engineers who read the same manuals you did. Your battalion is everywhere. Throwing Bailey bridges across streams the Germans thought would hold divisions in place for days. Filling craters with rubble and timbers so trucks can crawl over them within hours instead of weeks. Clearing mines from crossroads that sit at the center of entire operations. Your old life in construction battalions, the ones some officers laughed at as civilian work, pays off. Machines that scared combat engineers seem like familiar tools to the men who spent years building roads in Brazil. And then you receive a different kind of order. A reconnaissance mission toward the River. You are given a map with routes marked in pencil. 2 jeeps. 2 drivers, 5 seasoned sergeants. A partisan guide from the Italian resistance who knows the back roads. The task sounds simple: drive to the Valley, confirm the condition of key roads and bridges, then report back so the division knows where to move. You start along the route the map says is safe. Less than 10 kilometers later, American troops stop you. A U.S. sergeant blocks the road with his body and his rifle. "Lieutenant, you're not going any farther this way," he tells you. "There are enemy forces ahead. Somewhere. We're not sure where. But if you keep going, you won't come back." He points at a lonely house down the road. That's as far as anyone gets, he says. So you pull off to the side, spread the map on the hood of a jeep, and make a decision. Use the paved road you were told to use, and die. Or trust a maze of narrow tracks on the map's margins, and maybe live. You choose the tracks. With the partisan in the lead jeep, you snake through a web of secondary roads, farm paths, and village streets. Every few kilometers, the same scene. A small Italian pays. Ruined houses. Shattered bells and cracked church towers. And people. Dozens. Hundreds. Faces lined by hunger and fear. To them, you are the first Allied soldiers they've seen. They rush out, shouting, "Viva I Liberatori! Viva I Liberatori!" They hand you flowers, fruit, bottles of wine that you barely have room for. You pile the gifts into the jeeps, embarrassed, grateful, aware that only hours earlier those same hands might have been raised in surrender if the Germans had stayed. You keep moving. Where your briefing said, "Enemy likely present," you find only silence. Where your map shows, "Clear," you later learn German units passed minutes before. The front lines are no longer lines at all. They're threads, crossing and recrossing each other in fog and smoke. Eventually, everything narrows down to one name on your map. Piacenza. A crucial road hub you have to pass through to reach the Pa. You ask everyone you meet the same question. Are there Germans in Piacenza? No one knows. Some shrug. Some say they left yesterday. Some say they were there this morning. You decide to go. The jeeps roll into the city. Streets are cluttered with debris. Silent windows stare down at you like blinded eyes. You drive deeper, nerves stretching tighter with every turn. Halfway through the city, the answer arrives. Not in words. In bullets. A burst of machine gun fire cracks from an upper floor. Stone chips explode from the wall near your head. Mortar rounds begin to fall. The enemy is not massed in neat rows. He is scattered around you, above you, behind shuttered windows and half-collapsed walls. You are in the center of a killing box. Reversing would mean backing into the worst of the fire. Staying put would mean dying where you are. So you do the only thing left. You push forward. The drivers slam their feet down. The jeeps lurch ahead, bouncing over rubble, engines screaming. Glass shatters. A round snaps the mirror off one jeep. Another chews a line across a fender. You think in distances now, not in words. 800 meters to the edge of the built-up area. 600. 400. Every second feels like a minute. Every corner could reveal a roadblock. 300 meters. A shell lands close, showering you with dust. You taste brick and smoke. The partisan guide is shouting directions you can barely hear over the gunfire. 200 meters. You can see the end of the street, the fields beyond it, open ground, the kind artillery loves, but also the space where machine guns can't hide in walls anymore. 100 meters. The jeeps burst past the last houses. The fire thins, then fades. You don't stop until buildings are nothing but jagged lines behind you. You reach the Pa River hours later and complete the reconnaissance you were sent to do. Then you return by yet another route, one more loop in a web of roads your maps will never show in full detail. When you finally roll back into your own area, a day and a half late, you report to your company commander, proud of the villages you were able to liberate with your presence. He listens, then smiles with dry irony. All those gifts they gave you, he says, are what the Germans left behind when they passed half an hour before. He's only half joking. That's what the endgame of a campaign looks like. Units slipping through each other, civilians cheering whoever wears a foreign uniform and doesn't shoot at them, engineers using every road the enemy didn't have time, or machines, to destroy. And above it all, one simple fact. None of this movement is possible without the gear everyone once thought was useless. Here is what the Germans never planned for. They counted divisions. They counted tanks. They counted guns. They did not count on a small South American nation sending a division whose engineers could do the work of 3. The 9th Engineer Battalion, fewer than 900 men, supports a front up to 15 kilometers wide. Wherever a Brazilian infantry lieutenant leads a platoon, there is usually a Brazilian engineer lieutenant nearby, turning impassable into possible. In winter, you keep the roads from freezing shut. In spring, you keep them from dissolving into mud. In the pursuit, you keep them from staying broken long enough for a German staff officer to sleep easy. What the enemy doesn't know, what even some Allied commanders underestimate, is how this constant movement adds up. Every crater you fill in hours instead of days shortens the time it takes for tanks and guns to roll. Every Bailey bridge you throw across a stream the Germans thought would stall you for a week cuts another piece out of their plan. When the Allied advance finally closes a trap near Fornovo di Taro, the result shocks even seasoned officers. Around the town, the German 148th Infantry Division and attached units, including Italian fascist formations, find themselves encircled. Roads they thought ruined beyond quick repair are suddenly carrying Brazilian and American columns at speeds they didn't believe were possible in that terrain. Cut off from escape, attacked from multiple directions, the surrounded force, tens of thousands of men, surrenders. The headlines speak of divisions and generals. The photographs show prisoners marching with hands raised. What they don't show is the quiet miracle behind it. Roads that existed only because men in grease-stained uniforms spent nights under shellfire with bulldozers. Bridges that held because someone argued, months earlier, that Bailey components deserved precious cargo space on ships leaving Brazil. A reconnaissance officer who ignored a safe road to the PA and instead proved that movement through the back country was possible. Your battalion commander, a tough colonel who later will have his own battles with politics, holds together a unit stretched along an impossible frontage. U.S. artillery commanders praise how Brazilian engineers multiplied themselves, appearing wherever a blockage threatens to stop the advance. For the German side, the cascade looks like this. A bridge destroyed on Tuesday. An Allied bridgehead over it on Wednesday. A road cratered at dawn. Allied trucks using a bypass at dusk. What they don't know is that behind many of those miracles stands a group of men very far from home, using machines someone once called bicho, a monster, and declaring that, to them, these beasts are just tools of the trade. Because for construction battalion veterans in Brazilian khaki, a bulldozer is not a curiosity. It's a weapon. The war ends. Your division earns its place among the Allied forces that fought in Italy. The 9th Engineer Battalion returns home with a record of missions completed, bridges built, roads opened, mines lifted. You step off a ship, not the General Mies this time, but a Brazilian vessel, expecting, perhaps, the kind of reception you read about when the first echelon came home, bands, flags, crowds. Instead, you find something very different. The ship docks in Rio de Janeiro. The pier is sealed. Families are held 50, 100 meters away. No one is allowed close. You march directly from the ship into waiting trains as if you are prisoners, not troops who crossed an ocean to fight. On the pier you see your parents. You can't reach them. You can't hug them. You can't even shout more than a few words. Your battalion commander looks at the farce of a welcome, and quietly refuses to take part in the official ceremony. He leaves the ship alone and goes straight home. To him, this is not how you treat men who did their duty. At the old grounds of Realengo, now a reception point, there are no parades, no speeches worthy of the campaign you just survived. Just processing, paperwork, dispersal. And yet, for you, the meaning of what happened in Italy doesn't vanish with the lack of trumpets. You continue your career. You become a colonel, then a general. You command engineer units in peacetime, not to forge roads under fire, but to build the arteries of a growing country, including rail lines toward a new capital rising in the interior. You serve abroad as a military attaché. You eventually reach 4-star rank, commanding large formations and later, even serving your country in public security. You receive medals. A combat cross for individual bravery. Campaign and war medals acknowledging your part in the great conflict. But the pieces of metal are not what stay with you. What stays is the face of the bulldozer driver who refused to abandon his machine under shellfire. The memory of bad conduct, men from Fernando de Noronha who became reliable signalers. The engineers from construction battalions, the so-called paisanos, who turned out to be the best combat engineers of all, because they were never afraid of the machines. You know that without them, without their useless gear, Brazil's division in Italy would have been slower, more vulnerable, maybe even trapped. And that is why this story matters now, to you sitting here, decades later, listening. Because whenever you see footage of modern wars, sleek jets, precision missiles, armored brigades, it is easy to forget the men in fluorescent vests and grease-stained gloves, out on the roads and bridges, usually far from cameras. It is easy to forget that every dramatic frontline image depends on a quiet miracle of logistics, engineering, and stubbornness somewhere behind it. You don't have to be the soldier in the foxhole to change the fate of thousands. Sometimes you just have to keep a road open. If this story moved you, if you could feel the cold on that mountain road or the tension in those streets of Piacenza, then please click the like button. Every click tells the algorithm that this episode of history is worth remembering. We are committed to rescuing forgotten stories like this from the archives. If you want to join us in that mission, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And tell us, from where are you watching? Leave a comment with your city or state, and share if anyone in your family ever served in the armed forces, in any role, combat or support. Thank you for making sure that Lieutenant Marcos Nogueira and the roughly 900 men of the 9th Engineer Battalion do not fade into obscurity. They deserve to be remembered.